right, sorry about that. I lost power for a second. So, as I was saying, your students more often than not will be able to use that discrepancy as motivation. And part of what you can do for your students who are in that lower section, um, that's where you spend most of your time. So that public posting becomes the visualization for you in terms of how to allocate your time. So you know that if you have a student who is on that lower level of reading, when you have opportunities, that you go and you read with them and read with them and read with them until they are actually able to move up from T to E to F to G, so on and so forth. So the balance for those who are struggling more is those are the kids that get more attention. Now, if we bring that back to the behavior side of things, that same concept should apply. So if you have a child, so again, let's start by not thinking of it in terms of the typical everyone starts on green, you move to yellow to red, but everyone starts on red, you move up to yellow and then to green. Those kids that have a harder time off of red onto yellow into green, those are the kids that need more points. Those are the kids that need more support. Those are the kids that need um, more of your attention because for them, appropriate behavior is not automatic. Appropriate behavior needs to be taught. All right. So public posting in general can be used for any number of things. It can be used for general work. If you're posting work on the wall in your class, that is a form of public posting. The number of books you've read, the that your students are on, that's public posting. I had a curriculum, a math fact. So we had our minute math every day, and it was this highly sequenced curriculum. Movement through that curriculum became a massive public posting system that I would use. So any of these types of things that you want to look at over the course of a year can be used as public posting. All right. All right. Not similar to public posting, but in the same vein as public posting, we have this system that we can use, again, to motivate either an individual, a group of individuals, or a whole class using game boards and group contingencies. Now, this is a super fun thing that you can do in your classroom. So the premise is that it's basically a students versus teachers game, all right? So you have some target behavior that an individual, a group, or the whole class is trying to, that you're trying to reinforce. For every amount of time or amount of behavior that you see that is appropriate, the students move game board. If they don't emit that behavior over that amount of time or for the target amount of behavior, then the teachers move up. And very simply, whoever gets to the top first wins. Now, when done right, this is one of the most powerful, motivating situations that you can put in for a class. Very few things that I will recommend when it comes to reinforcement have a strong enough motivating condition to last over multiple days. When you use game boards and group contingencies, this is one of those few examples where you can use one contingency over the course of something like a week. And part of the reason that you can do that is because you, the teacher, are involved as well. So they see this gamification of this type of system as a much more powerful motivating condition. So the game board, very, very simply, is a visualization of where the child is and what they still need to do. Very, very similar to a token board. Again, just like a token board, when the student fills up the game board or moves to the top of the game board, they earn the reinforcer. However, unlike a token board, the teacher can move up too. So you are truly competing with and against those students. If the students get to the top of the game board first, they earn the reinforcer. But if the teachers get there first, then the teacher earns the reinforcer, or the student loses the reinforcer. Depends on the age of the student. So this is one where you read in a contingency for, okay, what happens if the students get to the top first? What happens if the teacher gets to the top first? This type of system can be used, well, so let's keep going description-wise, sorry. So game boards usually have 10 to 20 spaces on them for each the student and the teacher, 2 paths, usually a theme to increase motivation, but it's not necessary. For myself, we had a Harry Potter board at one point. We had a soccer board at one point. I think it was during the World Cup. We had a How to Train Your Dragon board. We've done superhero boards, so Spider-Man, Batman, whatever. Find the board that fits for your students, that fits their interests, that's appropriate for their grade level. So this can be anything from a group where you have a small group where you have 2 students, all the way up to a whole class contingency. All right. So here are a couple of examples of these boards. These are a little bit, these were pre-K examples. So you have, so princess and witches on the right. And you have Hungry Hungry Caterpillar on the left, so a couple of visualizations about what you're looking for. But what you see is, you have this villain character, you have this hero character, and moving up, you have this center space in the middle for whoever gets to the castle first is the one who gets the reinforcer, and that's really what you're looking at. All right. So with these game boards, what are some types of behaviors that you can target? Well, you are really looking at targeting these classroom management type behaviors. Everyone having materials, transitions within the classroom. You can do transitions between classrooms, talking in the hallway, class-wide raising of hand, things that your students know how to do, not necessarily that you're teaching your students how to do, but that need to be managed on a daily basis. So moving from their seats to the group carpet in under 30 seconds. They do that, they move up. They take longer than 30 seconds, or they're too loud, or whatever your rules might be, the teacher moves up. So they're not moving down, but rather the teacher is moving up. What that gives is this time limitation to how long they actually have to shape up that behavior if they want to earn that reinforcer. Now, what are your reinforcers? If you have a class-wide contingency, then you have to have a reinforcer that is appropriate for the class. Maybe it's a movie day at the end of the day on Friday. Maybe it's an extra recess. Maybe it is a no homework pass. Whatever it might be, you want to make sure that it is meaningful to at least the majority of your students. For those students who are not motivated by whatever it is that you are that you have as the group prize, and that is going to happen. You're going to have some students that don't fall into that category that week. You have a couple of different options. So you can either find a couple of different reinforcers that are available for the group, so that maybe you have a movie for some and an art project for others, something like that. You have outside for some, and like a special toy party for others. Whatever it is, you can get a couple of different things that are going to meet the needs for all your students. Finding different reinforcers is the easier thing. What you're more worried about are those small number of students, and they will happen, who don't have the social reinforcers to be able to work appropriately within the group contingency. And what I mean by that are those students who are going to intentionally torpedo the classroom. So if your goal is to transition quickly within the classroom, these are the kids that are going to take their time and intentionally not line up. And they are actually not at an appropriate place to work within the group contingency. And they can be excluded from the group contingency. We have spoken, obviously, a number of times about RTI. We have our tiered system. This is within a classroom. This is a tier 1 contingency. So you have students that are not necessarily going to respond to that. And for those students, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't get access to whatever your Friday afternoon party situation is, but they have to achieve it in another way that doesn't necessarily impact the results for the group as a whole. So if most of your students can transition in under 30 seconds, they move up. Your one kid who is taking his time, he or she doesn't prevent them from moving up. However, they have their own contingency where you are targeting whatever that appropriate behavior is. Maybe it's 45 seconds for that. Maybe it's a minute for that. Maybe it's 30 seconds with fewer than one vocalization or fewer than 3 vocalizations, something along those lines. But they have some contingency set up that is specifically for them. And we're going to get to those guys in a second. But in general, these game boards and these group contingencies are a really fun way to address a lot of different behaviors in your classroom. Similar to the group contingency is the hero contingency. The hero contingency uses the game board. It's the same idea or same mechanism as the group contingency. But in this situation, instead of having all of the students act as one group, you have one student act as the hero for the whole group. So in the hero contingency, you have one student who has one goal. And if they meet that goal, then they are going to earn the reinforcer for the entire classroom. Now, that can be a lot of pressure on that student, and that's okay. Sometimes that's going to be more attention and more pressure than they want. There are ways to mitigate that. But this is a way to take some of those students who are attention seeking in general and give them an opportunity to contact some positive attention. So if you have your kid who is not making the transition with the whole group, maybe instead of 30 seconds, their goal is to transition in a minute. And they previously liked the attention that they got for not meeting the goal. Well, now you say, okay, everyone else, you've shown us that you can transition. Good, you're all set. Our goal for this student is now to transition within 1 minute. And if he can do that 20 times over the course of the week, then he earns a party for the whole class. Now you have kids cheering him on, and you have kids pumping him up and trying to get there. And he gets all this attention for doing the right thing, as opposed to that negative attention for doing the wrong thing. Okay? That's the hero contingency. All right. For your kids that don't necessarily, so, all right, you have your kids who don't want those reinforcers at the end of the day. You have those kids who are kind of intentionally, intentionally not meeting their goal. We just spoke about them with the hero contingencies. We have other kids, especially in this special education world, who it's not that they don't want the reinforcer. It's not that they're looking for this negative attention. It's that they're not necessarily aware of their own behavior. So for those kids, you might need to start with some self-monitoring activities. And in this situation, you have your typical classroom rules that you're trying to encourage everyone to follow. But you are working with this subset of students to try to get them to a point where they are become aware of their own behavior. Until you are aware of your own behavior, you're not going to be able to successfully and intentionally follow classroom rules and do what others are kind of expecting of you. So we want to make sure that these students are aware of their own behavior within the context of their general surroundings. So with self-monitoring, you have the student record some behavior of their own. Maybe it's the number of times they raise their hand, or the number of times they call out, or the number or the duration of their own transitions, whatever it is that you are targeting. And you verify that with the teacher. Now, regardless of the success of the target behavior, when you're starting off with self-monitoring, you're first reinforcing accuracy. So if you have a student that your goal is that they call out less than 10 times a day, and they record that they called out 15 times in that day, if they are accurate in terms of that 15, then the student contacts reinforcement. Even though the goal is 10 or less, them monitoring themselves is the first target behavior. Once they are accurately monitoring their behavior, then you can start to say, okay, you have to be accurate and you have to get under 10. Without that knowledge of them being able to monitor themselves, then you don't know if they are truly able to come in contact with the goal that you have for them. So self-monitoring is a way that that allows us to get to some of the higher level group contingencies. All right. All right. So over the course of the last two sessions, we've talked about a number of different behavioral strategies. These are common, but these are hardly exhaustive. Every single one of these can be modified in some way, shape, or form. They can be used in tandem with other strategies. They are not the be-all, end-all, but rather some common ones that we see. It is important to notice that every single one of these takes some amount of time to set up and some amount of effort to manage over time. However, to a T, they are all worth it. The more time you're able to set up in the beginning, the more time you are going to buy back over the course of the year. All right, so that is the end of that lecture, and now we are going to move on to some of the academics. All right, so now we're going to move into the section here on academics, and I have this PowerPoint that I've put together over the years on Moodle. This is up on Moodle, and then in addition to this on Moodle, there's the PowerPoint on academic strategies that goes more into some thoughts on reading strategies and math strategies that are supplemental to the chapters in the text. So make sure that you read through those and begin to familiarize yourself with some of those strategies. However, I feel less strongly about the specific strategies and more strongly about how we actually look at our instruction and our analysis of our instruction for students with special needs on a general basis. So when I've mentioned a couple of times the training that we did at Max Charter School over the summer, and one of the things that they said to us was that they were hoping that this wasn't going to be something that we just like introduced to them and then left, and then no one ever followed up on. And my response to that was, we're actually going to be teaching you some things that will change how you instruct in general. Reinforcement was one of those things. And this concept, these words on the screen in front of you, the Learn Unit, are the other thing. And what we're about to go over is on some level, how I think all instruction should be delivered for any students. This is not what happens in schools. This is not done systematically by very many teachers at all. However, those teachers that do experience extreme success because this is not just a scientific approach to education, but a scientific approach to interacting with students in such a way that we can determine that if we're doing or components, that learning has to take place. So today we're going to talk about this concept called the Learn Unit. All right. So before we talk about what the Learn Unit is, there are a few terms that we have to clarify before we start. So the first is antecedent. The antecedent is anything that comes before a behavior. So if I ask a question, if I model something, if I give a direction, these are all antecedents. If I say, what is 2 + 2? That is an antecedent. If I say, everybody line up, that is an antecedent. If I, in some cases, if I turn on a projector, or if I walk into a room, or anything that I do as a teacher or that is done prior to a behavior occurring is an antecedent. When it comes to instructional antecedents, we need to understand that we need to be clear in our antecedents, that we are part of the antecedent. Those are the two big things. The next couple of points kind of go with those. But if we are asking confusing questions to our students, then we will not get the responses that we want to see. If we ask appropriate questions to our students, but don't ask them in appropriate ways, if we're too loud or too quiet, or we yell, or we, whatever it might be, we are not going to get the behaviors that we want to see. So antecedent, anything that precedes behavior. All right, next is the behavior itself. Behavior can be anything. If anything that a student does, anything that an individual does is behavior. All behaviors have antecedents. Sometimes we don't see those antecedents, but they are there. Our goal in education is going to be to increase behaviors, not decrease behaviors. We have to understand that behavior is communication, and communication is behavior. So there are lots of different behaviors that we are seeing. When we see behaviors, we we successfully communicated, and we are being communicated to, and we want to focus on those behaviors that we want to increase. Finally, we have consequences. Consequences are anything that follows a behavior. So antecedent comes before, behavior is the thing, consequence follows. Now, consequences aren't the colloquial term for consequence. Consequence in the lay language means don't do this anymore. That's all we're talking about here. A consequence is anything that follows a behavior. Reinforcers are consequences. Punishers are consequences. Reinforcers are consequences that promote behavior. Punishers are consequences that decrease behavior. All right, so what is the learning? The learning in and of itself looks at the antecedent behavior consequence relation, but it also understands that there are all these other factors, which we're going to get into in a second, that contribute to that antecedent consequence or antecedent behavior consequence relation in and of itself. So let's take a look at this antecedent behavior consequence relation. What are those three things and how do they work together? So first of all, the way that we should start to look at this is very simply, I ask a question, the student responds, and I provide some sort of consequence. I say, what's 2 + 2? This